Meaning that companies can take the day off. You can pay your workers for those days like you would with any other national holiday, and helping us to understand how this celebration came about, what the goals are of this celebration. We have Reverend Al Wilson from the Greater Warrior, and I forgot the last part of that.
That's
Willie,
Greater Warrior Worship Center.
The Greater Warrior Worship. He's been on the line for about 5 or 6 minutes. Let me see if I can get him on. Reverend Wilson, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Very well, sir.
You know, it's so interesting that we're talking about Juneteenth as a national holiday and, you know, celebrating it. But in reality, we're still trying to get people to not only celebrate the holiday, but for people to understand what it is that they're celebrating. And that's the part that I think that we really got to do a lot better on. Even our own people, you know, African people celebrate Juneteenth, but I'm not sure that we really understand what it is that we're celebrating. We other than celebrating the celebration. Am I making a little bit of sense? Can you talk a little bit about that?
You're making a whole lot of sense, sir. It's because it hasn't been passed down. We have lost a lot of things because we don't sit down at the dinner table anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We need to listen to what grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle and people that really, really care to teach us about Juneteenth, about what it really means, what it really stands for. It's more than a parade. It's more than playing music. It's more than barbecue. It's more than that. That somebody was, if you don't mind if I just say something, somebody was ear hustling while they were in slave master's house and heard that we were free, and she ran with that. We ought to be able to take the information that is given to us and run with it. Tell people, hey, look, do you really know what this is all about? You're able to play Xbox. You're able to play PlayStation because somebody had a conversation, and we're free now. But we don't have to become a slave to what we're playing.
Right. You don't have to become slaves to new icons or new idols, rather. You know, because we do get into idolatry.
Yes, sir.
Quite a bit. You know, one of the things that was crossing my mind as I was thinking through today's program is that enslavement has been a curse on mankind for literally all of my memory. Not just my own living memory, but my memory of the life of all human beings on earth. It seems like we've had enslavement at least 20,000 years, you know, as a part of our lived experience as human beings. And that when we talk about emancipation, it seems to me that we should connect the emancipation of African people from enslavement legally in this country. And we'll talk about that because I'm not sure the way I said that is actually correct. So you know what I'm talking about here, right?
Yes, sir.
But we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think that we should be connecting the idea of emancipation with the idea of the abolition of slavery, period, all over the earth, that we should connect it to everybody on earth that is experiencing the curse of enslavement, that we should be talking about all of them and supporting movements to eradicate slavery everywhere and to push up the absolute goal of ensuring that every human being on this earth has not only a right to live, but a right to eat, to drink, to have clothing, to have heat, to have light, to have health care, and to be able to have a shot at growing into being their best self. I know that's a really big aspiration, but I think that emancipation is a really big aspiration in the first place. So what's your thought about that?
Yes, I totally agree with you, sir. I think, even with healthcare, even with the statistics that has been put on us, that we are able to take more pain than white folks. We're able to, there's a whole lot of stuff that's out there. but it's our job to teach our community. We got to go into our community, and we have to reach them, and we have to teach them by any means necessary. Mr. Hare, I am one of the product of Head Start.
Yes. In fact, Willie was just telling me about that. You're one of the Head Start graduates, right?
Yes, sir.
You know, and you're with some good company. I mean, we've had Damone Smith was a Head Start, graduate.
Wow.
We had a number of Head Start graduates that have become councilmen and legislators and pretty important people in our community.
And I say that to say that you always wore the colors. And I remember as a little child asking you about the colors. Still today, some people don't know what the colors mean. You were able to tell me as a young lad because you didn't dress like everybody else. It was different.
That's true, and I haven't changed.
And that's the truth. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But our kids need to know you were able to sit down and be able to tell me what the colors meant, why you wore what you wore. It wasn't just a fashion statement.
Well, I believe as a Christian, I take a lot of my cues from what I read in the text. And one of the important scriptures that I had sort of appended to is the one that says that you should raise your children up in the way that they should go, because if you do it right, when they're old, they won't depart from the ways that you train them in. And so I try to be that mentor and that guide and that instructor everywhere that I was. Somebody had to do it, and I felt that part of that role fell to me. And I'm so glad that it fell to you, and you picked up the flag, and you've been running with the flag ever since.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I love it. So talk a little bit about this year's Juneteenth celebration. What was done? And it's interesting. Are we doing a lot of stuff today? Because I know that most of the celebration took place on Saturday and Sunday, this past Saturday and Sunday. Are there other celebrations that are going on today?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I found that interesting that Juneteenth weekend is for Buffalo anyway, is the iconic time that we celebrate Juneteenth. But this particular celebration happened, the June 19th happened on Monday. And so that's the day that it's being celebrated around the country. I'm pretty sure that when President Biden signed that declaration, he signed it to that specific day. So it's June 19th every year from now on. It's not like, Easter that changes, from one year to the next, what day you celebrate it. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
So it was intriguing because it didn't seem to me that we planned to have big celebrations on this Monday, which I would have thought that we would have done. But the important thing about it is we talk about Juneteenth in the African community as if it's an African holiday. But I'm really hoping that we mature enough in how we embrace the ideation of Juneteenth and see it as something even more than being an African holiday, although it would be a holiday you would expect African people to want to participate in, but as a cultural or a values phenomenon, celebrating the abolition of even the idea of owning another human being, eradicating that idea. If we connect that to what Juneteenth is all about, it offers the possibility of bridging this celebration to every community, not just in the United States, but every community around the world. And I'm hoping that we would grow in that direction.
I agree with you 100%. As I was in the parade on Saturday, I seen a lot of people lined up in the streets. Mm-hmm. A lot of love was being shown.
Yeah.
High five and happy Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was beautiful to see my sisters and my brothers, both old and young, and everybody was so happy. I wish we can keep that day every day.
Every day. Every day should be Juneteenth for at least for African people.
At least every weekend. Every weekend.
Every day should be Juneteenth. I mean, it's hard for us to to be present in our own minds with the reality of being enslaved. You know, we talk about it now as a historical thing that happened 150 years ago, but try to wrap your mind around the idea of being enslaved, being treated as if you were a horse or you were a cow or you were a chicken or a sheep, you know, you were livestock. Try to wrap your mind around that. That was the reality of 4.5 million African people on June 17th of 1865. That was their reality. That's what we need to be present with, that we never want to have that happen to us or anybody else on earth ever again.
Yeah.
Ever. We have to be the champions of that.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit, because I thought this was, maybe it's just my perception, but this seemed to me to be the biggest crowd of people celebrating a Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And I've been to every single one for all 48
I thought
years.
so too, Mr. Hare.
And
it was
this
crowded.
is, I mean, and not with any tension. You know, I mean, we've had big crowds during years when you had the Manhattan Lovers and the Pythons and all of that stuff going on, and it was a little tense. But this year was not tense at all. I mean, there was no tension in it at all. It was all, just what you were saying a moment ago, it was all love. But there seemed to be so many people. I was telling folks I thought there might have been 30,000 people there, you know, when I was there on Saturday morning for the parade.
As I began to look at that parade and saw all of the love, I was so happy. Really, I was happy. I even talked about it in church on yesterday. There's nothing like black love.
That's right. That's right.
There's
it's infectious.
Like it. I mean, the people, they were out there. It was a beautiful day too, thank God.
Yeah, beautiful day. And I think that helped too. Another thing I noticed that there was a lot of things for the children. I mean, just so many, more than I've seen in past years.
Yep, and there's so much depth. You know, I give so much love to Jomo Akono and all of the folks that make up the committee that produces the Juneteenth. I don't know if people know, folks don't get paid for doing this. This is an entirely voluntary program.
Wow.
You have Sankofa days for the week before Juneteenth, and you have the Juneteenth programs that take place on the Saturday and Sunday in the teens of June each year, and it just grows and gets better and has more enriched activities. Then there's all of those vendors that have, and I get a lot of African clothes during that time period, right? That's my Christmas shopping period, right?
Yeah. It should be all of our Christmas shopping. It really should.
Well, you all know that I tend to swim in my own direction in the water. I don't go in anybody else's direction. I go in mine.
Is that shirt from one of those?
It's one of those. Okay. That's right.
Gotcha.
Right. And so it's to me, there's so much that goes into this Juneteenth celebration and being done so well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
and so many pieces. I mean, think about all of the things that you saw. You saw the police,
Security.
you saw the county police.
Yep.
Our county executive, Mark Polenkarts, I shook his hand and we were there. You know, we saw a number of our council people there. Councilman Wyatt, I think April Baskin from the county legislature was there.
Wow.
I saw the candidates for the Maston district. You know, I don't want to get into all the names, then you get mad at me because I didn't say all of the names. Like that,
that's
right?
the truth, sir.
But you saw all of that. But then you saw all of these organizations.
Yeah.
You saw these. I didn't even know that there were like 8 or 9 different girls' dance troupes.
Yeah, it was a lot
that
of those
were
too,
not just active. They had like 40 or 50 people that were the active participants in the parade. So you know there were more people than that were involved in each one of those those dance programs. That's a lot of people that are engaged in those kinds of after-school programs that are developmental, you know, that get our kids raised up in the way that they should go, learning normative values that will help them undergird their education and be able to seize educational opportunities after high school, and then turn into the doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs that we want our people to be as they grow forward. So, Reverend Wilson, what was your role in this year's celebration?
Well, I am the director of the Martha Mitchell Community Center in the Kenfield Langfield home. Mm-hmm. And there are two active drill team and step teams from that Kenfield Langfield area.
Excellent.
There's roughly about 3,000 people that live in Kenfield Langfield. Mm-hmm. I often say that is a city within a city by itself.
It is. 3,000 people is a lot of people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that has been I call it an iconic community, but I don't mean it in the sense that, in a celebratory sense, but it's been an intact community. You have to understand, for those of us that were born in projects, that lived in projects, we have like hierarchies in the projects, right?
Yes, sir.
And we always thought that Kenfield Langfield was on the upper end of the hierarchy of us project people.
Wow.
Because we thought you all lived in the suburbs.
Wow.
Wow. I know you didn't think that when you were living, when you were working there, but that's how those of us that grew up in the Perry, that's how we thought of it. Right?
And I am a product from the Commodore Perry project.
There we go.
Wow.
There we go. So you know all about this, right?
I know all about it.
I tell people all the time, the Perry project is a place that you cannot get to accidentally, because it ain't on the way to any place. Okay? If you got lost, you wouldn't wind up in the Perry projects. You may end up in Langfield, in Lakeview or Hamburg or someplace, but you wouldn't wind up in the Perry projects.
Well, the Seneca Casino is over there now. So
well, yeah, we do have something close, right? I mean, but the Perry projects was like a isolated, intact community. But, you know, Kenfield Langfield was sort of like that as well. You know, I think the project communities tend to be like that. You know, they are their own little world and so on. But great. So you had a dance troupe, you know, that met there, and you had young people from the Kenfield Langfield that participated in those activities. Is that right?
Yes. And not only that, we were able to sit down and teach our young people about how important this is. It's more than just putting on boots and colors.
Yeah.
What it really meant, and people died for this. We really, really need to drive that people died for this. This is why we're marching. This is why we're dancing. This is why we're hollering Happy Juneteenth. It's just not something to say.
Yep.
This is a lifestyle. This really happened.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that our young people really know really what it's all about. A young girl by the name of Hare, who lived in the Kenfield Langfield homes all of her life, is back there helping drilling, helping instructing these young people. And they got a trophy for being second place.
There you go.
You know how proud that is to go back into the projects and have this trophy in the hallway of the Martha Mitchell Community Center.
Nice. That
young people can say, hey, look, we did that thing. We were out there and it was hot. They were sweating, dehydrated, and everything.
Because it definitely was hot. It was hot and sunny, but that's what you want for a Juneteenth celebration. You want hot, sunny days.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And to bring something back to say, hey, look, we were together. We were one band, one sound, one, and we marched and we just enjoyed ourselves together. And it brings wealth back to our community.
Yeah, right.
To say, hey, look, we ain't all fighting.
I just thought it was such a warm and enriching kind of an experience. And like I said, there was no tension at all during the course of this celebration. And so
I have to give kudos to the police officers.
Yep.
And the security. They had security too. They did a marvelous job. It was a massive amount of people, a lot of young people. And even I saw some things try to kick off, and security, police officers, and people in the community was right there to nip it in the bud. So that was wonderful to see also.
And you know what also was wonderful to see was the fact that there were so many African police officers in the first place.
That too. That
That's
was awesome.
When we went to the first one of these Juneteenth, celebrations, I think there were like 4. now it seemed like there were like dozens, of African police officers that were there,
and they seemed like they were enjoying themselves.
And they were talking to people. I mean, everybody was shaking everybody's hands, giving people, a hug, giving people some love and so on. It wasn't like, the police is an occupying force and the citizens being occupied. Everybody was treating each other as if they were each other's uncle and aunt and cousins and brothers and sisters. And that's really what you wanted to take place,
You know what, sir?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you 100% because while I was out there was a young gentleman. He had his pants down,
with their underwear out.
Yeah. And it was this old lady, old mother.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Baby, pull your pants up. Everybody don't want to see that." And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And that young man went and pulled his pants up. Wonderful. And I jumped off of what I was on, and I just gave that brother. I said, "That's peace, man." Yep. And you keep that. When our seniors tell you to do something, just do it if it's not going to harm you. Right. And he said, "Pastor," and I didn't know that he knew who I was, but he said, "Pastor, I really appreciate that. That means something."
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's going to not just recycle in him, but he's going to recycle that to other young people that he's in contact with. Right. And it begins to regenerate what used to keep us together as a community of people. A lot of people don't know the reason why we're here today is because after the formal emancipation of or abolishment of enslavement as a legal institution, which I want to hit on in just a second, but after that took place, African people, in spite of the fact that they had no training, no education, no systems, no institutions at all, they were basically like treated as livestock on these plantations. They walked out and built communities in Greenwood, in Tulsa, in places all over the country. I mean, hundreds of places all across the country. They had tailor shops. They had construction companies. They did bridal shops. They had their own restaurants. They had grocery stores. They did their own, supply routes from warehouses to where their retail shops were. All of that stuff was done literally the day after they walked off those plantations. They started getting that stuff done. They went and found their own brothers and sisters, their own parents, their own children. They went and found them. That's how we have, continuity in the African community today because of that strength of character that existed inside of African people at that time. And that's what we have to teach to our children today. That's who we actually are. We're not, what you were talking about, Reverend, these people that just do a lot of, jumping up and down and hollering and flattering themselves, with gaudy, behavior and so on. So can I just real quickly, Pastor, I just wanted to hit this point. When we talk about the abolition of slavery, I need for us to understand a couple of points. The Civil War supposedly ended on April 9th of 1865 when General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant. I know we only got 2 minutes. Surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox. That is written as the end of the Civil War. But the Emancipation Proclamation didn't get to the people in Galveston, Texas, until the Juneteenth period of 1865, which meant that the war was over 2 months before the African people in Texas got the message that slavery was abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation. The other point I want to make on that is the Emancipation Proclamation didn't end slavery. It only ended slavery in the places that were under the control of the South secessionist states. But other states, I won't go through all of them right now, but there were like states like Missouri, Kentucky, Delaware, and Maryland that never joined the Southern Confederacy. slavery still existed there. Even with the Emancipation Proclamation, it didn't affect them. Places like Virginia, Louisiana, and Arkansas, and Tennessee that were under the control of the Union soldiers, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to them. So Lincoln wasn't trying to abolish slavery. He was just trying to disconnect the South from the economic system that was allowing them to be able to fight, because they needed the slaves to run the plantations, and without the slaves, they'd have to run the plantations by themselves, and they weren't able to do it. The last point I wanted to make on this is that the 13th Amendment, which was passed in December of 1865, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery except as a punishment for being duly convicted of a crime. That meant that we actually institutionalized slavery as a punishment for crime. And we connected crime and enslavement as if they were together, almost as if African people had done something criminal that was the reason why they were living in an enslaved condition in the United States, at this point. We can't talk about much more of that right now, Pastor, but I just think we need to put a little truth into the sauce, so we understand what it is that we're tasting when we start chewing on these things. Right? So, Pastor, I appreciate so much you taking some time to talk to us a little bit about today's Juneteenth celebration. Tell people that I'm a little bit crazy. You have to put up with me. They taught me how to read. They should have taught me what to read, because I read everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again, okay?
And I thank you for being a man of integrity that you are. And I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate you, sir, more than you'll ever know.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, we got to take a quick break and take care of our sponsors, so don't go away. We will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Norm MacArthur, who is our in-studio audience of one. Welcome back, Norm. And we're here with our engineer, the man who knows how to produce these live streaming programs, Willie H. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here.
Just to close off a little bit more on that discussion on Juneteenth, not Juneteenth per se, but some of the learning that we got as we were studying up on this day. I went to an article written by Tara Hunter. It was entitled, When Slave Owners Got Reparations.
Wow.
Norma, I went to this for you because I knew you were going to have something to say about this, right? It says, on April 16th of 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill emancipating enslaved people in Washington, D.C. So 9 months after he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he then signed a separate proclamation for emancipation in Washington, D.C. The reason why that was done is because Washington, D.C. is under the governance of the U.S. Congress, not under the governance of the local, mayor of the city of Washington, D.C. Okay. So they had to actually pass a law in Congress separate from the Emancipation Proclamation, which was an executive order. They had to pass a separate law in order to free the citizens, the African citizens in Washington, D.C. So that's real interesting. But just to go a little bit further on that, the price that had to be paid for the emancipation of the enslaved African people in Washington, D.C. was reparations to the people who had owned. My mouth has a hard time saying that people have the ability to own other people and whatnot, right? But descriptively, I'm trying to say this as best as I can. But to the people that call themselves the owners of these enslaved African people in Washington, D.C., for that population of people, they paid reparations to the slave owners and didn't pay a dime to the enslaved people.
Unbelievable.
Norm, help me now.
I'm dumbfounded with that. I mean, I can't understand something like that. They've reaped and took advantage of slaves all those years. Well, and then because they lose this,
because this country's rule is based on property rights. Even your citizen rights, your civil rights are in fundamental reality property rights. You own your rights. But they can pass laws to shape how and to what extent you can own your own rights, just like they can shape your right to own your property, to own your house, to own your car. They can shape your right to own your rights to yourself. You need to understand this, because if you don't, the people that are playing the property game, they're going to be way ahead of you in this game. They're going to be way out in front of you if you don't understand what's really going on.
I am so disgusted, and so to injury. I mean, time and time after again, even after we got and we built communities, they would destroy black, and there's been so many communities. They would destroy, and then we would put money in the bank. Do you know they even take the money
out of the bank? They say, Playboy.
And so injury.
Your money's not here anymore.
So those reparations, people laugh at those reparations.
Yep.
That's serious. We've been stolen so many times, time after time after time after, and still the same thing with farmers, black farmers, time after time. And so injury, it's just disgusting. I want to go home now. It is.
Don't go home, though. Don't go home, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to get mad. They want you to fold up your tent and go home. When you come back, your job ain't going to be there.
Hey, I'm just learning what you just said. Reparations should have went to us, and the white, once again,
they should have paid.
The owners take the money, always taking. How
can you enslave people for 300 years? And then you get paid for enslaving the people?
Right.
But the reason why that gets done is because the enslaved people were considered to be the property of these owners.
Wow.
And the laws in this country are basically built around protecting the rights of property. The only do you remember we talked about the Dred Scott decision? It was in 1856 or 1858. Dred Scott had been enslaved in Mississippi. His slave owner, husband and wife owners of their plantation. The husband in that marriage died. When he died, the wife decided she wanted to go back with her family, who lived in the territory of Missouri. Missouri at that time was not yet a state; it was a territory. So she wanted to go live with her family because that's where her support system was, right? So she took Dred Scott with her because he had been her attendant, when they were in Mississippi.
Right.
But then whatever was going on in Missouri, she decided, well, I'm going to go back to Mississippi because I got to be like a goddess, in Mississippi. I'd have 300, enslaved people around me to fan my face and wipe me up, whatever it is that goddesses get, And so she wanted to go back to be a goddess in Mississippi. So she said, come on, Dred, we going back to Mississippi. And Dred said, oh, no, we not going anywhere, okay? You can go back to Mississippi, but I'm staying in Missouri. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, you can't do that. You're my slave. He said, no, I was your slave in Mississippi. They don't have slaves in Missouri. So I'm not going to be your slave here. She took him to court.
Wow.
And of course, the American courts, all of them down the line, one court said he's not a slave, another court said he is, property rights and so on. It got all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, we've talked about this. The Supreme Court in this case was led by Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger B. Taney. And Roger B. Taney ruled, he wrote the majority opinion in this case, saying that Dred Scott had to go back to Mississippi.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
And what he said was he never actually decided the case on the basis of what was right or wrong for Dred Scott. Dred Scott's making a claim as if he had property rights over himself. What Roger B. Taney said is, we don't recognize you. Not only did we not recognize you having property rights over yourself, we don't recognize you as having any rights whatsoever. In fact, what Roger B. Taney said in that decision was, essentially, you are neither man nor property.
Wow.
No, listen now. He said further, it would have been better if you had come to us as property. If you would come to us as if, I'm adding words to this. Right. If you would come to us as livestock, as a sheep or a cow or rights. A donkey or something, it would have been better if you would come like that, because then you would have come to us as property. Then we would have had to make a decision about who owned and had rights over your property, you as property.
Wow.
But you can't own you because you're an African. You can't own you. We can own you, but you can't even own yourself. Therefore, you can't make a case before the Supreme Court. You cannot petition this court because we don't recognize your existence as a man. He actually wrote in his decision that nothing in the Constitution of the United States recognizes the idea of an African person being a man. That's the Supreme Court of this country.
Wow.
Okay, Mr. Hare, I just need to ask. We're going back even today. I think I just heard that they just gave reparations to some people in California just recently.
Yep.
Now, there are certain decisions that have been made similar to that right there. Now, you just
there are some states that are more enlightened, and they're doing better because they consider this to be states' rights. So an individual state can do something that the federal government might not be willing to do.
Okay.
So that's why the people that live in Washington, D.C. don't have the right to vote in the Senate because they don't have a senator. They don't have a congressperson because they're actually the property, if you will, of the Congress and not owned by their local governments.
But Mr. Hare, there are certain things that are so simplistically changed, and the concept of what's went on and what's happened in the past should be able to be changed, just like this Dred Scott decision. You know what I mean? Now, these are things, even dealing with the family should at least be able to get, and I know it goes a lot deeper than Dred Scott, but reparations for these things, because we're a different people than we were back in the 1800s.
But remember, who is it that has to make the decision to free people, to give reparations for people that have been abused by other people? Who has to make that decision? It's got to be Congress. But Congress is not one person. Congress is 435 people in the Congress, and another 100 people in the Senate. Those people have to make the decision, and the reality is there is not enough of those people who see what you just said as right. more of those people think that we should make them go back to being slaves again.
Mr. Hare, how did they come about with the decision to pay reparations to the people in California?
Because the state government of California, California has a governor and has a state legislature. So there's a state assembly and a state senate in California. Those bodies, those local state bodies, they came up with that determination. Governor Greg Gavitt, I think his name is Gavitt, I'm probably saying it wrong, in California, he signed that legislation to take a piece of California's state revenues and use them to pay reparations to people who are the sons and daughters of enslaved people that still live in California. Remember now, California only has about 9% of its population that's African people, so it's not humongous like it would be if it was, say, Alabama or Mississippi, or Georgia or someplace like that. But your core point I'm trying to get the understanding on is that the California state legislature was willing to do that for the citizens in California, but the country as a whole is governed by the Congress. And you see what's going on in the Congress. The Congress right now has people in it that say that it should be illegal to even teach that Juneteenth exists.
Right.
Their position is, well, if you start teaching people about Juneteenth, then you're going to have white kids getting, feeling frosty because they're going to be feeling like, well, you're celebrating something that my foreparents did, and I don't like that. It makes me feel bad. That's literally what's going on, right now. So you can't teach your actual history because Ron DeSantis and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matthew Gaetz and Paul Gosar and these other kind of curious people, because they say that that's indoctrinating people into feeling bad about the things that white people's ancestors did to black people's ancestors. That's what we really are working with. So this issue of the slave owners getting reparations, the compensation clause is not likely to be celebrated today, but as the debate about reparations for slavery intensifies, it is important to remember that slave owners, far more than enslaved people, were always the primary beneficiaries of public largesse. And what they mean by that is, in order for you to make these plantations work, you had to do hydraulic projects. You had to clear rivers, you had to clear bays, you had to drain some places, you had to create new waterways. You had to redirect water. That stuff couldn't be done by one business person. You had to get your county and state and federal government to actually pay for getting that stuff done. So the plantation owners benefited from that. Stuff that they couldn't have done individually was done by public tax dollars at the local, state, and federal level. So they got all of that. And when slavery ended, they got the benefit of being paid for the loss of their property. But the people who had been treated like property for 300 or 400 years, they got nothing.
Yeah.
And still got nothing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, when you look at it, and I'm looking at it in the terminology that you're speaking on, these plantations, I guess, and I know it to be true, they were run as businesses. And and to that point, I guess that's the way that they look at it. But, the businesses in turn usually have to pay the people that work for them. How about severance money? How about going to that? Because
they gave you severance money. They give you 2 weeks of the pay that you had been getting. You had been getting zero pay, and you still get zero pay.
Boy, oh boy.
Why are you mad, right?
Wow.
Just to put this in perspective for you in terms of the dollars and cents.
Wow.
In 1865, according to the article from Tara Hunter, it says that an enslaved person would be purchased if they were. I'm saying this wrong. when the government was talking about providing reparations to the slave owners, the dollar value that they put on the enslaved people that they would pay the slave owners for was $300 per enslaved person. Now, they probably sold an average enslaved person for significantly more than that, but that's what the government was willing to pay as reparations, was $300 per enslaved person. I want you to put this in context. I want to help you to see this in context.
Can I just ask you real quick, what would that be equal to today?
That's exactly where I'm going right now,
okay.
right? So that was in 1865.
Right.
If you took $300 at the inflation rate, which like average 1.84% per year, going from 1865 to 2022. By 2022, that $300 would have turned into $5,221. Wow. So let's do a little multiplying. If we took that $5,221.77 and we applied that to the 4.5 million African people that were enslaved in this country in 1865, that would have turned into, and I want to make sure I say this number correctly, that would have turned into $23,497,965,000. That would have been the cash money for those people in 1865 money multiplied by inflation to today, right?
Wow.
The District of Columbia Emancipation Act is notable because it was the first time the federal government authorized the abolition of slavery, which hastened its demise in Virginia and Maryland as runaways from those states fled to Washington, D.C. It offered concrete proof to enslaved people that their allies in the federal government, that the federal government might facilitate the destruction of slavery everywhere, and it confirmed the worst fears of their foes about an interloping, tyrannical president. Lincoln was considered to be a interloping, tyrannical president because he was talking about the abolition of slavery. It's interesting because they called President Barack Obama a tyrant president. And now they're talking about Joe Biden as a tyrant president. Anybody that talks about freedom for people that have been enslaved, anybody talking about putting resources and opportunities in the hands of people who have been denied resources and opportunities, they're always considered to be tyrants. The people that are exploiting people, they're always considered to be, populist heroes in the American front. Abraham Lincoln was anxious to preserve his fragile alliance with, this is just the truth now. Abraham Lincoln was anxious to preserve his fragile alliance with loyal slaveholders. In other words, those 4 states that didn't secede from the Union, he wanted to keep his relationship with them. Those other parts of states that didn't secede or were under the control of the Union Army, he didn't want to, tick them off by freeing their slaves. So they kept slavery. Even when the Emancipation Proclamation was written, it exempted all of those places in the country that were under the control of the North. So Lincoln wasn't trying to abolish slavery. He was trying a war tactic to be able to win the Civil War. In reality, if the South had been better behaved, they could have reintegrated into the Union and kept slavery. If they had just been nice to Abraham Lincoln and said polite things, they could have kept slavery. So abolishing slavery was never any of these people's goal. Their goal was power. Their goal was to keep control over the resources and power that they had amassed for themselves. We were never anybody's objective. We've always been the object of exploitation, but never the subject of opportunity and resource development. Go ahead, Norm.
I'm just saying, this is something that's kind of brand new to me. I always looked at Lincoln as like a hero.
I know, but because y'all don't read the books.
Well, I'm just saying, it seems to me that they keep stuff like this out of the education that they give us.
It's not just that they keep it out of your education. What I'm saying to you now is in the public domain.
Yeah,
It's in the education.
If more people were like you and read deeper into.
Well, that's the thing. It's the context in which things are explained to you.
Yeah.
If I keep telling you that the Emancipation Proclamation freed African people, in a certain sense, it freed some African people, but it didn't abolish enslavement itself.
Right.
But if I keep saying the word emancipation means to free something.
Yeah.
So if I keep putting this in front of you, Emancipation Proclamation freed those African people,
right,
you will grow up thinking that that's the way you should understand it. And all of the people that said that they were for the Emancipation Proclamation,
right,
you would see them as heroes.
Right.
And all the people that weren't for the Emancipation Proclamation would be the bad guys.
Right.
You wouldn't understand that many of the people that you thought of as heroes were also bad guys. Remember what Tolstoy said: the enemy of my enemy is supposedly my friend.
Wow.
But sometimes the enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. And we need to understand that reality. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you have crystallized thought in your head, and you realize that maybe the truth is you don't have any friends. Once you realize you don't have any friends, you better start on the path of figuring out a way to make real new friends
Right.
for yourself.
Right.
We've not done that. We've been letting other people tell us that they're our friends. We need to be about deciding what makes you my friend, what makes you even eligible to be my friend, and then you need to nurture whatever does that so that you build real friendships, real relationships that you can count on, that you don't end up allowing yourself, like, no disrespect for I know Tim Scott is your cousin, you know, our African-American senator from South Carolina. He said that he knew Norm, you know, that they were friends. But maybe you find out that maybe Tim Scott is confused. He seems to think that these Republicans are his friend. Well, they may be his personal friend. You know, like whatever the guy is, the billionaire that's in bed with Clarence Thomas, you know, that's his friend. But they're friends because the billionaire is getting access to decisions through Clarence Thomas that he otherwise would not have been able to influence. But he can influence those decisions through the office of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas thinks this person is his friend. And maybe they are friends, but that's not friends for us as an African people, because the people that Clarence Thomas is friends with are people that are exploiters of not just African people, but a whole bunch of other people, you know, in the continuum of our world. So you have to understand who your friends are, what makes a person your friend. And we've not done as good a job of that as we should. So they welcomed the end of slavery in Washington, D.C., but they chafed at payments that validated the right to own property in the form of human beings. If compensation, this is William Lloyd Garrison talking, he said, if compensation is to be given at all, then it should be given to the outraged and guiltless slaves and not to those who have plundered and abused them. That was William Lloyd Garrison's take on the emancipation or on the reparations issue. Modern anti-slavery advocates believed that any manumission plan had to placate property rights that were buttressed by the Fifth Amendment, which required just compensation for government seizure of private assets. Just think about that. The Supreme Court decision that made it the Supreme Court's imprimatur on paying reparations to the slave owners was based on the premise that the 15th Amendment required you giving just compensation for government seizure of private assets. So Black people were private assets. That's the core of that message. So I just want us to understand what Juneteenth really needs to be understood about. From the perspective of freeing African people from slavery, we need to understand the context in which that takes place.
Right.
But understanding Juneteenth in terms of what it should mean to us overall,
Right.
we as a people, if anybody should be a force fighting against enslavement of anybody, anywhere, at any time, forever, it should be us as an African people.
Yeah.
And the way that we should do that is for us to teach against enslavement ourselves, and for us to align ourselves with other people who are fighting enslavement in other places anywhere in the world. That's how we begin to become our own champions and stake out our own place in the continuum of the affairs of the world. Thank you all for supporting us. We look forward to talking to you all on Wednesday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We will see you all then.